Welcome everyone to the EED webinar number 20 on December 15th. And the theme today is the keys to thriving. So we're going to look at two different mindsets, the survival mindset and then the creative thriving mindset, and how we toggle between those two different mindsets. This is useful for your own personal work, also for coaching and for conflict management, leadership, and healing. We're always toggling between these two different mindsets. It's not like we are only going to live in one or the other. Both are available to us. And what I want to show is when we use both together, that's when we actually really are creative and really thriving, when we use both together. But it's often happens that we get trapped in just the survival mindset. All right. And I'll talk later about if we're only in this thriving mindset, we're actually not evolving or getting anything done. All right. So we're just in sort of a blissful Zen state, floating around in our essence, really kind of in hibernation mode. So the two work together. Thank you for all of you who are watching the recording. Thank you for all of you who are joining live. And I do encourage you to join live because you can ask your questions and make comments and help steer me towards anything that feels very relevant to you. So I don't like to just lecture. So please do jump in and with your comments and questions. And I really enjoy the dialogue with you guys, with you all. So what specifically are we looking at today? We're looking at how to build a resilient mindset so that it flows freely with creativity, agility, inspiration, and autonomy, meaning that we're not depending on others to validate ourselves, or we're not trying to control others or have others control us. This is, we're free and independent, coming from a full expression and free expression of our essence, yet still working in cooperation with our world and with others in our world. I'm going to show you how we build that, because that is not so commonly done, nor is it commonly taught. We're mostly taught how to compete and kick and scratch to get at the top of the heap there. So what else are we looking at? So as some practicalities, and which is what I try to include in every webinar, is what are some practical tools that you can practice on your own without needing to take EED courses, etc. Yes, of course, we have those courses, and those modules will be starting in the new year in 2022, in January. But I want things that you can walk away with immediately. So we're looking at some simple ways where you can infuse more inspiration and meaning into your daily activities, even just washing the dishes, so that becomes more meaningful for you. Nothing is mundane. We can thrive in all the mundane and boring moments. There are ways to do it. It really depends, again, on our mindset and how to do that. This also will add more vitality and meaning into your relationships. And I got a few other webinars I could recommend that you watch. We'll get to that later, but there are some related webinars that I did before that I will refer you to watch as well, if you haven't watched them already. Then some tips for how to handle or counteract feelings of doubt or fear or stress or anxiety, or coercion. Coercion meaning when you are feeling manipulated by others, when they're twisting your arm, forcing you to think or do certain things in certain ways, all right? So whenever we are facing adversity or conflict, how is it possible to still remain resilient and creative? How is it possible to still maintain our autonomy? And how is it possible to still cooperate, to be cooperative as opposed to combative, without compromising our essence or our spirit? You might say without compromising your values, but it's really staying in integrity while still remaining open. That sounds like a paradox. And that is what we're really going to look at. And that really is the core foundation of what it means to thrive. Are there any questions or comments here on what you've seen so far, or what piques your curiosity? If there isn't anything, just give me a thumbs up to let me know to move on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This is Chiaza.
Yes.
Well, one, this is fascinating because I I started a coaching business and I'm struggling with how to deliver the change of transformation that I was able to do for myself to my clients in a way that wasn't too woo-woo, because the way that I did it was woo-woo. And so this sounds promising. So I'm very intrigued.
Great, and I'll tell you right off the bat, this stuff with EED is very, very woo-woo, but it's also really down to earth and practical. Right. So I've worked for 15 years on how do I encapsulate this and make it translatable to, you know, even the most atheistic or stodgy corporate person, is what I'm going to say. And that's not to pass judgment, because there's always this woo out there, but then we also have to keep our feet on the ground. Exactly. And be relatable. Yes. So that's also a paradox that we work with here. Yes. So great that you bring that in. Yes. And if anything sounds too weird and woo, just interrupt me and have me explain it in a more down-to-earth terms. Okay.
No, I love the woo-woo, actually. That's not the issue.
Yeah, me too. I can go on and on all day.
Yes, but in order to convey that and teach that in a way that's relatable, yes, you need to be well-rounded. Yes.
And that's what I mean, because I know that there are some people watching, you know, on the channel that'll say, "Oh, I love the woo," and there are others that are going to just click it right off and say no. Right. But they will find the information still very useful. So again, like that's why I say, you know, if it sounds too woo, you can love it, but also say, well, how do I say that to somebody who doesn't want to hear the woo, right? So I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what is emergent essence dynamics? What does it do? I do this in every webinar, but I do it in a little bit of a different way each time. So really, it is a model that is capturing the fundamental process of human transformation. What does that mean? It means we work in patterns, and we go through transformative processes that actually follow patterns. So I'm looking at and identifying those patterns. However, it's not one pattern fits all. So whether you are working as a coach or in leadership or for facilitating groups or you're mediating conflict or even in the healing arts or just working on yourself and your own personal growth, you need to learn how to see the patterns that are emerging and be able to capture them, work with them, and match them to some fundamental patterns that happen in nature. The way, for example, like the creative cycle works, all right? And we have other webinars on what are those natural fractal cycles. And I say fractal because these patterns are appearing everywhere on the small and large scale. It's really the same pattern over and over again. And once you develop an eye or an ear for it, the transformation arts or transformative arts become actually very easy and understandable, even when things look very, very complex. So that is one of the purposes of EED, is to take complexity and distill it down into its core simplicity. Then you can bring it back to a rich complexity, all right? If that makes sense. So how do we do that? There's three things that we're doing. First, we're looking at what are the relationship dynamics, meaning between people, whether somebody's in relationship with themselves, others, a group, the world, it doesn't matter. We're looking at what are their actions, behaviors, and energies. We are not paying attention to the stories that they tell. The stories that they tell are very different than what they are doing. So we're looking at what are the core actions and behaviors and energies of truth. And I will go in a bit more into that shortly. Then what we're also doing at the same time is, as they act and interact with themselves or each other, we're building a foundation of resilience within them. And that I will show you as well. That's the purpose of this webinar here, is how do I capture resilience? And that becomes the foundation for transformation. If a person is not in a resilient state, they will be locked into, and I will show you this in the next slide, they will get locked into core programming that will not change in order to protect itself. When we are resilient, we are more relaxed and receptive, and we allow ourselves to be influenced, and therefore we allow transformation to happen. But if we are feeling under threat, if we are disconnected, if we're feeling empty or fearful, we will not change. We will actually defend our core programming rather than open up and allow ourselves to be influenced. So before transformation happens, we build a foundation of resilience. Then we apply those actions, behaviors, and to the natural patterns of change and growth in the creative process, those fractal cycles. And in fact, all EED techniques are based upon fractal cycles. The whole EED model is a fractal model in itself. And you're also looking at what are all the fractal patterns of the actions and behaviors that you're seeing before you. Now, that might sound complex, but it's actually really, really, really simple. Bettina, Alina, you can attest to that. You've taken all the courses. So once you get a hang of seeing patterns and seeing actions and how to dig into it, it actually becomes really, really simple and easy, is what I'm going to say. So I'm going to show you some of those basic patterns, right? And we'll look at some of our universal behaviors that we all share, okay? Questions or comments here? I see some thumbs up. All right. So here are 4 levels of relationship dynamics. Another way to look at it is 4 levels of truthful behavior. We have 4 different levels of truth depending on what we're in relationship with. So at the top here, we've got the level of story. Let's call this story and identity. This is me in my own singular point of view. Therefore, I hold one piece of the pie and it's one singular truth, my point of view. Everyone else is going to have their story, their identity. They also hold one piece of the pie. It's a different piece of the pie, right? So they are also seeing and experiencing one singular slice of the truth. Now, I might change my story, change my identity, or change my point of view, but I'm still in one slice of the pie, one slice at a time, all right? That becomes very important for when we get in relationship with each other. So, so here's a little diagram to show you what that looks like. When I'm in my story, I'm in my identity, my point of view, I'm building around myself a bubble of reality. And then I'm interpreting the world around me through my bubble of reality. So I'm not experiencing actually anything outside my bubble. It's a closed bubble. I'm experiencing the world on the surface of that bubble as if it's a little movie that I'm interacting with, because I'm interpreting the world through filters. Does that make sense? Through the filters of my beliefs. Now, where did I get those beliefs? Where did the programming come from? It doesn't matter. I'm using it. That's what matters, okay? We don't need to know why it's there. It just is there. Because if you start to figure out why is it there, why is it there, you're actually aggravating and reinforcing the story, okay? So if you want to change the story, you don't need to ask why it's there. Just start working with it as it is. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So now when I'm walking around in my bubble, we all are here, okay? This is not a bad place to be, is what I'm going to say. And I'll explain that later. But when everyone is in their bubbles start bumping up against each other. And we move into the level of game. This is another relationship dynamic. This is truth in opposition, all right? So we have 2 closed bubbles competing with each other. One bubble might say, well, I believe in hot. And the other one says, well, I believe in cold. No, it must be a hot world. No, it must be a cold world. Cold is better. No, hot is better. So it's a clash of belief systems, all right? And so they end up competing. Who's going to conquer whom? Or so it's really all based on agree or disagree. You're my friend if you match my bubble, okay? But nobody's going to match it perfectly. So there is always going to be a degree of opposition, all right? It's just, when is that opposition going to show up? When's that little bit of friction going to happen? When we find out, ooh, we don't quite agree here or there, okay? This is also the level of games that we play. And I've got other webinars on this that break it down in much more detail, but the 2 main games we play are validation and control. Validation meaning, do I exist? And that can sound like, do you like me? Do you approve of me? Just tell me you love me so that I know I'm actually here and not invisible, okay? And then there's control. How do I make sure that I will exist? And that is, I will have power over you, or you will have power over me, so that I feel safe and secure and that I can ensure that I will continue to exist, all right? And these are the main games we are playing, all right? And we're always doing this in opposition. This is the level of conflict and friction. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because if we move into the other levels, then we can make this friction creative and productive, so that it's sparks that create a creative fire that can produce and create vitality, as opposed to create a fire that's going to bomb and destroy. Okay, so okay, if we stay in this level, we're always going to be in conflict. We're always going to be depleting our vitality. But if we move below the red line, and this is not well taught, and this is one of the main purposes of emergent essence dynamics, is how do we move below the red line into dream level, which is truth in flux. This is where we are in a more open, receptive, and fluid state, where we open the bubble to include the other and actually experience them for who and what they are. What does that mean? We're putting our awareness outside of our bubble, projecting into theirs, and we're taking information back into ourselves from their bubble. What is that going to do? It's going to influence, change, and transform us. The key to transformation is to feeling resilient enough that you will open your bubble so that you will be influenced. It is not about influencing others, because if you do that, you're imposing your bubble on them and you're going to do nothing. There will be no effect. So it goes back to what Gandhi said: be the change you want to see or be in the world. That means you do it first. This is the secret. So I'll show that to you in a bit. How do we toggle between this game level and dream level? And it really is up to you to open your bubble. How do you do that? You need to connect yourself to this source level, all right, of essence, meaning there is no identity anymore. You are just your pure essence. I'll explain essence in a second, because I want to go back to dream here. So that does not mean opposites don't exist in dream. In the game level of opposition, we'll still have hot and cold, but they are acting in opposition to each other. They're trying to conquer each other. Whereas in dream level, they cooperate. They are complementary. Hot and cold work together to create a larger spectrum of temperature. All right. Hot and cold are expressing the same thing, the same essence, but different ends of the spectrum. One is the hot end and the other is the cold end, but the two are really the same. So this is where in dream level, where we can start marrying paradox, where opposites work together in a complementary fashion to build a larger spectrum or a larger whole. So this is where Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker actually work in a cooperative way for both of them to grow. Darth Vader needs to be the villain so Luke Skywalker can become the rebel master or the Jedi master, all right? Without Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker would not be provoked to develop his Jedi master skills. Does this make sense? So both are needed. This is where good and evil cease to exist, because good and evil are working together for a greater whole. Good and evil become perception. Over here in game, there is definite, hard, fast good and evil. And that will feed our identities and have us choose sides, okay? So when we are reconciling conflict, we want to move below this red line into a more resilient and complementary state, where we can start to understand our roles and functions in the whole group dynamic, so that the group can start working more holistically with itself, all right? That's for facilitation techniques. We've got a webinar on that too, and a whole course on it. Now, so I'm coming now to source. Source is the level of our essence. Let me explain. Essence is our permanent, timeless aspect of ourselves. That's the awareness of our awareness, so to speak, or a level of all potential. So here's the woo part, the part of us that lives on, all right? Call it spirit, divine consciousness, divine self, higher mind, soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, but it is the part of ourselves that is beyond identity. Identity is more the vehicle that has us express ourselves. But what is the thing ensouling that vehicle, that essence that comes into the personality, all right? That's what we're talking about. And at source level, because we are at a level of infinite awareness and all potential, there is no more identity here. Therefore, we are the whole pie. We're not a slice of it. We are the whole unified pi, as is everyone else. So we are here all made of the same substance. Therefore, we are all experiencing unified truth as a unity. Now, is that possible to experience in the physical earth? No, because we are in separate bodies. But we can get a taste of it through a feeling of unity, through a consciousness of unity that we can cultivate with ourselves. Does that mean we become telepathic? I don't know. Maybe. But we certainly will be vibrating on the same frequency with each other. Okay? We will be on the same consciousness level here. All right? So, does this bring up any questions or comments? Because I'm getting a little bit into the woo now as we go into the source level. And in these courses, we drop people into the source level, and they actually do they feel unified. They are feeling unity, the basic essence. They are really as if they are a part of the same mirror. All right, this is a phenomenal thing that happens. Bettina, you can attest to that. Elena, you can attest to that. You've seen it happen. So, any questions or comments here, or shall we move on? But I wanted to go in detail these 4 levels of relationship dynamics here. Are we good? Yeah, go ahead, Bettina. Yeah.
Perhaps just a short note, because this was really one of the most impressive parts in the EED modules when practicing this, dropping into essence. I really, really love this. You can't just speak about it, but you only can feel it. And I think it's one of the most precious moments in life whenever you feel it. And when you learn to practice it, and when you are practicing it, in your life, that's really most fulfilling. And that's I'm teaching too, Troy, that, and this is not woo-woo, sounds like this, but I'm always saying when I do facilitations or when somebody asks me, but this is my enemy and I have to make a deal with him. And I said, yes, that's best condition to do it. Because when it's your friend, it's easy and you might do something wrong. But when it's your so-called enemy, so when you are not at all in the same bubble, you are much more conscious and you can just practice what you have been talking, and then, well, might work out.
Yeah, let me add on to that. At game level, you're going to have friends and enemies. So the person opposite you is either going to be a friend or a foe, right? But at dream level, the enemy becomes a teacher. They are an awakener. They start awakening things in you that you weren't addressing within yourself. And this is where we can start doing healthy shadow work. If you've looked at Jung, okay? If we're doing shadow work at the game level, we're hurting ourselves because we're going to be fighting ourselves. But in dream level, dream level is based upon acceptance. I'm getting into that in the next couple slides here. I'm looking at time and I'm thinking, oh, we're going to go longer than an hour here. But if you don't mind, you can stay if you find it fascinating. Otherwise, if you have to drop out, you can go and watch the rest through the recording. But were there other comments here? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm just not quite sure how to formulate it. Oh, but
sure.
Okay, there's this. So at the source level, at the level of essence, is that a state you can hold? Is that a state that is?
You can sustain it, but I will tell you, you don't want to sustain it for all day because you'll just end up doing nothing. All right. So it's a state of bliss. Here are the symptoms of essence. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to be.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah. Now, when people touch into that, it's almost like they go into this blank space. It's almost like a feeling of free fall. Some people will touch into that for a microsecond and then freak out and say, oh my God, I gotta do something. I gotta keep busy because I can't be so still. All right. You'll have others that will pretend to be in this space and say, oh, I'm a good meditator and I'll just be here. They're not really dropped in because they're still trying to control the state of being. Okay, that means they're doing something. There's a natural drop into the symptom of it is, oh, that's it. That's it. Oh, how do you feel? Calm. That's it. They feel this ineffable, this peace and calm, unconditional peace and calm. Now, then we can teach you how do you sustain and maintain that, because then you can start adding in a focus. Now, it's not truly at pure essence level, but it'll be like the next level up, like where we have essential qualities. And those main qualities will show up as peace, love, unity, or limitlessness. So when you've got coaching clients that are dropping in, many coaches will see this happening. It's just they don't know how they're doing it, or they don't know how to capture it or sustain it possibly. But suddenly their clients are suddenly really inspired, and they feel like, oh my God, I feel so great. Like everything is possible. They're tapping into limitlessness, limitless creativity. Or they may drop into a feeling of, I just feel so calm, so peaceful now. So they're at peace. Those are the first two they'll run into. Or they may then move into love, where they'll feel like, oh, wow, I'm just so thrilled and feeling in love with everything, or just happiness, joy, or bliss, right? Or they may feel unity, where they feel like, I'm so connected to everyone or everything, or everything feels at one with me. So there's different variations of unity. So there's a webinar from 2020. I may put it in the comments of the recording here, called The 10 Essential Qualities. We go through that. I also go through it a little bit in our last webinar, the Enneagram Simplified. Those 10 essential qualities are more what we viscerally experience, all right? Limitlessness, unity, love, and peace, all right? Pure essence. And we do teach this in our module too. How do you drop into the pure state of essence? It's just, it's absolute nothingness. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, nobody to be. That's it. And that takes a bit to really sustain that, because we want to always jump into something active, because we are living in an active world. We are not in to be truly at source is to go beyond death, frankly. Right? Because we would go beyond the body, and then we'd be these malleable, I don't know, disembodied blobs of consciousness that can truly unify. It's like gaseous. Is that making sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So might be a little woo, but it's actually not. We experience this. We experience all these four levels all the time. We're not well trained on how to willfully drop into dream and source. We're not well trained on how to willfully sustain those states of being. Okay. So let me show you how. Okay. So okay. So the story in the game, that's the level of fear, reactivity, and dependence or codependence. This is where we are really depending upon each other or external sources to make sure that we exist and control our existence. Dream and source, these are unconditional levels, and this is where we find resilience and autonomy. That's the foundation of our resilience and autonomy. When we are dipping our toes below the red line and plugging into dream and source, and we can actively and willfully drop here, it changes how we participate in our games and how we participate with ourselves in our story. These become more fluid, less threatening, less fearful. Therefore, it's not necessarily fearlessness or having courage. It just means we're not threatened. We're not in this reptilian reactive mind of survival. We can certainly switch it on, but we still have a lucid part of ourselves that doesn't get caught away in the automatic programming. We still have an awareness that can monitor or control or puppet our persona ego behaviors, if that makes any sense. We've kept a connection with our essence, and that's what I'm showing you in the next slide here, all right? That'll make sense what I'm saying here. We are always living in a dual pathology, all right? Or a dual persona, if you want to say. We're always toggling between surviving and thriving, and we are far more focused on survival mode, where thriving is not well taught, not well encouraged. okay? And that became obvious as of March 2020, that the world is not interested in teaching us how to thrive. If I may get on my soapbox for a little bit there. So here we are at essence. I explained that, essence and source, all potential infinite awareness, but that doesn't live in our 3D world of linear time, okay? That's a world of wholeness and infiniteness beyond the body, all right? But we have access to it, all right? So when we are expressing ourselves in the physical world, we have a split. We have what I'm calling the pathetic self and the resilient self. Both are oriented towards action because they want to express and create. However, they're expressing and creating for two different reasons, and it's for one simple thing. Do you notice the difference between these two? The pathetic self is disconnected from essence. It's separated from, or it feels like it is disconnected, okay? That's coming from being an individual. I'm an individual consciousness separated from the whole. It's as if we had this big, huge, infinite mirror, and then the mirror got shattered, and the pathetic self is one fragment of that mirror, and it says, oh my God, I'm a broken off fragment. And it's focused on the edges of the little shard and says, I'm separate from everything. And then it feels like it's not plugged into any kind of foundation. So therefore, it must be a God unto itself. So it's always asking, am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? And it's seeking an external source of power because it wants to return to the source it came from. It wants to be whole again, all right? So all of its actions are about reclaiming that wholeness and that power. So it's trying to answer this question, am I okay? By asking, do I exist? And how do I make sure I exist? Validation and control. Again, that's going to that game level. So it's always playing these games. Now, you'd say, well, it's easy. The pathetic self should just go back through that gap. No, 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 because on this side of the gap, this looks like annihilation. It looks like death. It will never, ever go there. So pathetic self, the very thing it seeks is right behind it, but it's the thing it fears the most. This is the foundation of shadow work. It has disowned its own essence because it felt ripped off and ripped away. Is this making sense? It's like, I went through that birth canal and I got separated from that infinite womb. I got spit out, rejected. I'm now on my own. I feel ripped off. I'm not going back up that canal because I'll die if I go in there. Does that make sense? It's a basic human thing, all right? So, by the way, in module 2, we actually take clients through a process. How do you take the pathetic self safely back through that gap? And there's a whole process to that. And it's just going through all their layers of resistance and fear, and you peel it away until there's nothing left, and suddenly they find themselves in essence. I'm like, oh my God, here I am. It sounds easy, and it actually is easy, but it's not, because pathetic self is very, very resilient. It's a fighter. It will do everything and anything not to go into that gap. So the irony is that the pathetic self does not realize it's using an infinite amount of creativity, but it's channeled for the wrong reasons. It's to try and answer this question, am I okay? Which becomes unanswerable for it, because it'll never feel plugged in. This is also why we are prone to control and manipulation by others, because when we feel that gap is aggravated, when we feel disconnect, empty, etc., we're going to try and plug into something or someone else, be it a person, an expert, a religion, a philosophy, a program, it doesn't matter. But that is what's going to, we're plugging in so we can feel safe, secure, and validated, right? So I have other webinars on manipulation, etc. So how do you manipulate someone? You aggravate their gap, and then you provide the source. You play both ends. And that's what's been frankly happening since March 2020, by the way. So our pathetic selves have been terrorized. So,
may I have
yep.
a question?
Go ahead.
Give me mean by shadow work?
Disowned aspects of ourselves. So for example, if I look at you and I say there's a quality in you that I can't stand, I hate, it's because I'm disowned it in myself because I don't identify with it. All right. So I'm fragmenting myself from my wholeness. All right. And many people would say that I could never be a cruel person. Well, if cruelness is part of the whole spectrum, that means it does exist. There's a function for it. It can be abused, right? And that's perhaps what I'm hating in it, but I can't say I'm absolutely 100% not cruel. I'm disowning an aspect of myself, right? And when I embrace cruelty, so it's not a threat, and I accept that I can possess cruelty, it doesn't mean I have to use it, but I can possess it, then I'm actually beginning to accept you because I've started to accept myself. So shadow work is part of reclaiming disowned or dissociated aspects of ourselves so that we can find more acceptance in the wholeness of the world. All right.
So if I understood well, if I see a person who is judging someone else for something, it is because is rejecting that part, resembling, what is judged in the other person. Okay.
Yes, I'm not as judgmental as them, right? And there's going to be a quality in there that you've disowned and distorted, right? You'll say that person's an asshole because of this, that, and the other. But when you actually open yourself to begin to re-embrace it, you'll realize, oh, it's asshole was the surface part of it. It's what they're really doing is they're expressing a particular quality, but it's getting distorted, right? So they're distorting, you're distorting. What we're doing is, again, that's part of the shadow work, is going back through this gap into wholeness, right? It's not easy work because it's about, tough acceptance of ourselves and others.
Okay.
Facing our demons, so to speak, going through what I call the death's door. So a part of ourselves crumbles to reemerge, transmuted and transformed. Okay. Didn't quite expect to go into that much detail of it, but again, in order for us to get into a thriving mindset, we need to pay attention to how our pathetic selves are functioning. And when they take control, now you could call this saboteurs, gremlins, monkey chatter, there's so many names for it, okay, or negative thinking. They're operating off of a reactive programming that got conditioned within ourselves, and every experience where we're slightly traumatized by things we don't accept, we're going to develop a pathetic self, and it's going to have a pathology to never go back into what it perceives of as a gap. So if you don't catch me when I fall, you've forced me through another gap, I will never trust you again because you abandoned me, you rejected me, you didn't save me when I was falling, et cetera, right? I make up a story and I say never again. Pathetic selves are based upon never again, okay? And then we start repeating that and repeating that and repeating that, but that can get us into trouble because it's not always the same situation again and again and again. There is always opportunity to grow and evolve. That's where the resilient self comes in. So the resilient self is also taking action, but the difference is it's got a free-flowing connection to essence. It's got a two-way street. It's emerging from essence, and it's plugging back into essence. So essence can move through it. So it's a vessel of essence, okay? Whereas pathetic self is an imitator of essence. That's the simplest way to explain it. The pathetic self is trying to imitate essence and plug back in, whereas resilient self is plugged in, and it is a vessel of expression of essence, okay? So the resilient self is saying, I'm okay. Do you notice how simple that sounds? I'm okay. As opposed to, am I okay? Really? Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? And it goes on forever and ever and ever, whereas the resilient self says, yeah, I'm okay. Then it has time to create from source in order to express essence. Therefore, it creates what it wants. It creates what it imagines. It can create anything, including nothing. So this is the problem with the resilient self, is it's so creative. It's also, and it's so okay. It can just say, I'm fine, just being totally still and doing absolutely nothing. That's also an expression of essence. Does that make sense? So we actually need the two to work together. The pathetic self is in fact the assistant to the resilient self, let's say. It's the one that's going to go out there and find all the cracks in the wall and say, oh my God, look at that crack, and look at that crack, and look at that crack, and what can be done about the crack, and who put the crack there? And then what we have to do is not let it get out of control, because it's going to try to solve the problem. That's not its job. It's not equipped to solve the problem. It is an expert at identifying the problem. Does that make sense? Pass over responsibility to the resilient self, who has the connection to essence, all right, the free-flowing connection to essence. It can then look at the cracks in the wall and make some decisions. Okay, there are cracks in the wall. Great, I've got something to do, something to take action on. I can fill the crack, paint around the cracks. I can make the crack bigger. I can tear down the whole wall. Or I can hang a picture over the crack, or I can just set up a chair and stare at that crack and love it forever. It's got solutions, okay? So we need to get them working together. The pathetic self gives the resilient self something to do, all right? And the resilient self can relieve the pathetic self from annihilating itself or exhausting itself. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's where we're in survivor mode. Then we can say, okay, here's the needs that need to be taken care of. Now let the pathetic self deal with it from a thriving mindset, not a drowning mindset, okay? Because when I'm surviving, I feel like I'm drowning and I can barely breathe and I'm freaking out. I don't realize I'm kicking and screaming and moving my legs and wasting all this energy saying, oh my God, I'm drowning, I'm drowning, I'm drowning, I'm drowning, I'm drowning. Whereas the resilient says, you're swimming. Oh, it's a shift of focus. Does that make sense? So what's the first key to switching over from a drowning, surviving mindset to a resilient and thriving mindset is, how am I actually okay right now, despite everything? I know I don't like what's going on, but how am I actually okay? And whatever pops up, and it might pop up real quick, and then it might disappear just as quick, catch it and stay with it a little longer and connect with that. How am I still okay? Well, I still have my sense of humor. Ha, ha, ha. What good's that going to do? See, I just left it. But, oh, I have my sense of humor, ha ha. I can ask myself, so what's it like to laugh? What is it like to just enjoy my sense of humor? And then ask, how does that feed my well-being? Now I'm starting to forge a connection back to essence when I go through enjoyment of the moment and how that feeds my well-being. Now I can start sustaining my resilient self a little more because I'm starting to feel how okay I actually am. And that okayness is feeding back to me. And it's not breaking off into the gap again. Do you see how that connection can snap? And then I go over to pathetic self. Oh, I have my sense of humor. Oh yeah, what good's that gonna do me? I just broke the connection. Does that make sense? Because I discounted myself. And we do that so quickly, so quickly. So here's a practical tip in your daily activities. How am I okay right now? What am I enjoying in that? How does that feed my well-being? That's simple. And then don't complicate it. The pathetic self loves complexity. Okay. Any questions, comments here before I move on? I'm spending a lot of time on that slide there. How are you doing with this information? And by the way, this is in other webinars, but I explain it in different ways and talk about it in different ways. But great. How you doing? Ready to move on? Or okay. So there we go. So here's where the pathetic self is. It's playing on the level of game. It's in opposition, all right? Because it's disconnected. So it's going to try to connect with somebody saying, you could be my source, or it sees somebody as that gap and it's trying to get away from them. So the other person either is going to be a source or a gap. And this is why you've got this tug of war going on, the agree, disagree, conquer or be conquered, okay? This is the level of dream, the resilient self. It's still taking action, it's still expressing, right? But it's not threatened because it's got that foundation and connection to essence. Therefore, it's okay. So I'm okay with myself, I'm okay with you, therefore I can learn from you. You can influence me. I can influence you too, but it's just out of generosity and an act of creation. It is not about trying to influence you so I can control you. Do you get it? That's the difference. Then there is the pure essence, which is a place of all potential. There is no active creation here. It is just being at one. It is a unity consciousness. So I can be at one with myself and with you. We are made of the same substance. And this is where we actually do reconciliation work. So if I was working with somebody in conflict, they're going to be at game. My first step is to drop them into dream and get them communicating and feeling resilience in relationship. Then I drop them further where they're going to experience each other's essence at a unity level. Then they can go back and heal, redefine their dream, and redefine their game. And that's how conflict works. I've got other webinars on that. You have to look into 2019, the fractal nature of conflict. Okay. So how do I open that bubble? I have other webinars where I go through this. One webinar would be webinar number 9 of 2020 called Core Vitality and Resilient Wellbeing. We'll talk about that here. Also webinar number 10 from 2020, the Essentials of Healthy Relationship. And then this is smattered through other ones as well. If we want to maintain our game and keep our bubble closed, we're going to be acting from judgment. So we'll go through this cycle of, I recognize what's over there, I judge it according to what I'm seeing on the edge of my bubble, and now I act upon it. So what I'm really doing is I'm acting upon my idea of you. I am not acting with you or upon you, okay? I'm acting on my idea of you. And I'm hearing your responses through my ideas about you. This is where people miscommunicate. Okay, because they're really not listening to each other. They're listening to each other's, to their own ideas of the other person. Does that make sense? I'm hearing you through filters. So I recognize what you're doing. You could be shaking your head like this, and then I'm judging it, and I'm saying, oh my God, you disagree with me. Oh my God, you hate me. I better do something about that. So I try to please you, and I come closer, and then you're like, no. And I say, oh my God, I'm threatening her. I really now have to hug her. And, no, get back. Oh, now they're attacking me. Right? I'm not even interacting with you. I'm interacting with my ideas of you. Does that make sense? So when we act from judgment, we're not in connection with the other person. Okay, that's reactionary behavior. So we're moving in this constant cycle of recognition, judgment, creation. And then we recognize the next thing, we judge it, and then we create from that. Okay, that's going to keep our bubble closed. So the first step to opening the bubble and dropping into dream is acceptance. We don't act, we're going to judge. I'm going to see the person shaking their head, and I'm going to say, oh, maybe you don't like me, you don't agree. But before I do anything, let me move into acceptance and just say to myself, oh, they're shaking their head. And it is what it is. There's nothing I need to do about it. Then I can become fascinated with, oh, they're shaking their head. I wonder what that is. What's going on? Without putting myself in the equation, right? So I'm putting my attention over there on the other person with fascination. And then I'm guaranteed to find something that I can appreciate in them. I'll take that back into myself. Now I can start enjoying their company. They will start to relax and open their bubble by a mirrored effect. Why? Because I took something into myself from them without acting upon them yet. That's the key. How do I do that? Well, it takes some resilience because it's a vulnerable act to look at something over there that might be threatening to you become fascinated about it, and then take that part into yourself and let yourself be influenced by them. All right. Then I can engage with them and start participating with them. And then we are co-creating. And then we can recognize the next thing, which of course we'll judge. But before we act upon the judgment, we move into acceptance. These 8 steps become easier and easier the further along we go. But if we cannot get to the next step, we have to go backwards and look at what am I not accepting? If I'm finding it hard to be fascinated, go back to what needs to be accepted here. If I'm not enjoying it, then go back. So what can I appreciate? Or go back. What can I be fascinated with? What can I accept here? So these work backwards and forwards. It's not absolutely linear. It's organic. But once I have a little bit of acceptance, then I can move into fascination. Once I have a little bit of fascination, I have more acceptance. They're cumulative. Once I'm enjoying something, I can appreciate it a lot more, become very fascinated, and accept a whole lot more. This is what makes us more receptive and accepting of each other. So this is where I can start turning my enemy into my teacher, because I'm becoming fascinated with what they're presenting me instead of trying to fight off what they're showing me or presenting me. Is that making sense? Now, I don't recommend trying this out with the first mortal enemy you meet. Start with something you can already accept quite a bit, so that you can practice the other stages of fascination, appreciation, and enjoyment, and get to know what those are. Then gradually move into things you have a little bit more of a difficult time accepting. Do it gradually, gradually, gradually. Now, by the way, all the EED courses are based upon this. This is one of the very first things you learn. We do this in a practical way. In fact, you'll spend 3 days moving from tier to tier, from game to dream to essence, back to dream, back to game. You're going to learn how to become facile with this, fluent and facile with this. All right. And this is a lifetime of work. This is not just you can learn in 3 days. No, you got to practice it. But you're given the practical keys on how to do this and all the variations of it. I can't cover that in one webinar. All right. But what's the effect on you already with this information? How are you doing with this? Questions or comments? Yep.
Okay, this is fascinating. So I recognize the dynamic that you're creating. I haven't ever seen it put quite like this. Mm-hmm. So I love how translatable it is. However, when you say fascination, if you're interacting with the person, anything to be fascinated about. So for example, anything mundane like the color of their shirt, yes. What types of things are we looking for here?
Anything, because don't start judging yourself and saying, well, that's not fascinating enough, because you've mm-hmm. just closed yourself off. You've just acted upon your own internal judgments, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the very first things we naturally do. We're like, oh, but there has to be something more interesting. In fact, I take you through a whole afternoon of how to name the first thing you see, name it, and start engaging with it. Okay, it's through an acting exercise called Meisner repetitions. You learn how to do these repetitions because it forces you to have an open bubble. The Meisner repetition will fall apart if you've closed the bubble. So you go through a boot camp of open bubbleness, okay? And yes, I'm fascinated that your shirt is a red or a pink or a fuchsia or salmon color, right? And I just focus on that. When I focus on that, I begin to forget about myself, my hangups, my identity, all that stuff. And I can put myself into the throes of fascination, which will eventually fire up into throes of passion and enjoyment. Okay, start with the smallest, most obvious thing to become fascinated about. Now, let me qualify this with another thing. There is a difference between fascination and curiosity. Now, think about that. Feel into that for a bit. What do you believe is the difference between fascination and curiosity? There's a reason why I don't put curiosity here. Anybody?
Well, curiosity brings up questions. You just, why is this? Why is that? Why is this? Why is that? That puts you in a completely different space than a state of noticing. there's one that seems more passive, the other one seems more active, I would say.
There you got it. Yeah, that's it. The curiosity is still a bit, I can keep myself safe. It's like I can observe you, but I'm not going to touch you, right? I'm holding myself behind a wall, or it could be perceived as I'm in my ivory tower, and I'm curious about you, coming from a high to a low status, okay? With fascination, I'm fully throwing myself over there and into you. With heart, soul, body, and mind, all right? It's an open bubble stance. Curiosity can still come from a closed bubble stance, and it can be intellectualized. I'm curious about you, but I don't want to be affected by you. Do you see? Fascination is, I'm openly fascinated. I want to discover you, and I'm willing to get dirty while I do it, right? So I'm willing to be affected. So therefore, there's no status anymore. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's what it's got to be. And a lot of people don't realize they're not in true fascination because they're still holding back. So this is why it's best that I get fascinated about the color of your shirt than what's going on in your heart. Do you understand? It's a leap too far. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if I'm sitting across from somebody who I'm going to call a racist, it would be better that I'm just fascinated with the shape of their glasses. That is going to be a baby step into coming into relationship with them, because I am not asking to be on the same level of values or perceptions with them. I'm simply coming into a simple relationship with them so that we can start moving into essence to essence instead of identity to identity. Does that make sense? Because I'll project on them. If I'm trying to say, oh, look at this racist, I wonder what's going on in their heart, I've got this judgment. Well, there's nothing going on there because they're a racist. They're a cold, stone-hearted, cruel person. And I'm going to keep judging, and that's going to pull focus from, oh, I didn't realize they have a beautiful color of blue eyes. Does that make sense? And you notice when I say that, I'm actually starting to open my heart to them. Then imagine them, their perception of me. When I notice the beautiful color of blue eyes, I soften and open a little bit. Well, guess what's going to happen to them? They'll have a moment of softening where they'll meet me at that level. Then they might jump back up and close, or I might jump back and close because we both freak out. Like, oh my God, we can't connect like that. We're mortal enemies. But this is what happens, and we massage into it. So in reality, we toggle back and forth. Game dream, game dream, game dream. But the good news is every time we drop into dream, we can stay there a little bit longer. Why? Because we've been there once before. And the more we repeat it, the more we can sustain it. So the key is to just repeat, 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 repeat. Is that making sense there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, we're at top of the hour. I got lots more to share, so if you want to stay, you can stay. And actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording here and call that part 1, and then I'll restart the recording and call it part 2. All right, just so I can divide this up hour by hour. So let me just stop the recording now, and I'll post both parts onto the YouTube channel. So for those of you who were listening to the recording, thank you very much for being here. Be radiant, be resilient, and enjoy the moments, and try to put some of these concepts into practice. And then also look into the comments section here or the notes section, and I'll note some links. And stick around for part 2.